Hi, I'm Gardener Scott. Irises are a favorite flower the world over, and like many gardeners, I grow them in my own garden. Today, I'm moving this clump to another location. So join me as I show you how I divide and plant bearded irises. These irises were actually planted by the previous homeowner, and they were okay in this spot for a while, but I'm redoing this particular garden area, and there's a bare spot in the front yard. So I want to dig these up and move them so I have the color of these flowers added to the color of my other irises in the front. The first step is just to dig the rhizomes out of the ground. Using a spade or a garden fork, just pry the iris rhizomes out of the ground. You can expect that there'll be many big pieces, lots of clumps, and you don't want to cut any of these as you push your spade into the ground. Just a simple lever action, and then once the soil is loosened, you can actually just grab these clumps by hand and pull them out of the ground. You really don't need to worry about damaging the rhizomes or the roots at this point. The irises are pretty tough. In an old established clump like this one that I just dug out, the irises will have grown very close together. But after you've dug them out, you'll notice that you can separate the individual rhizomes very easily. So this rhizome will grow into a completely new plant. This rhizome will now grow into a completely new plant. You'll also notice some of the clumps that are a little more spread apart. In this one, you see nice fresh leaves coming from this rhizome right here, and new leaves coming from this rhizome right here. But in between, there's an older rhizome that has nothing growing from it. And this might be one of the original pieces. This isn't going to produce any more, so you can actually discard it. You see at the junction, there's also a piece of a rhizome. That won't do you any good either. So you can just break them apart, discard this piece, and all of these nice rhizomes with leaves out of them are the ones that you'll want to move to a new location. Or if you're just spreading out the clump you have to renew it, just move them a few inches away from the main clumping body. Now, as I've already shown, I think it's really easy to just break them apart. But you can also use pruners to cut off those older sections that you don't plan to use anymore. Tease the roots apart at this point. This rhizome in particular, you can see that there's part of it branching off into this direction and part of it branching off into this direction. You could separate these further by cutting or pulling apart, but they're both connected to this rather large rhizome. And so even though I could cut it and make a much smaller piece like this piece may take 2 or 3 years to get to the point where it will start to flower. Whereas this piece that I've left connected to the larger piece of the rhizome may actually give me flowers in a year. Each of these individual iris rhizomes are now ready to plant just about anywhere. However, they were growing in a clump with all of the roots feeding the entire body of the irises. And so once I separate them into individual rhizomes, these few roots, many of which are damaged in the transplant process, are usually not enough to support the growth of the leaves. So what you want to do at this point, just to help the rhizome conserve some of its energy, is to prune off the leaves at about 3 or 4 inches high. And so I'll just continue trimming off the leaves of the individual rhizomes, preparing these for planting. Now, these irises actually were in a relatively shady area, so the leaves haven't grown exceedingly tall. If you have irises where the leaves might be 15, 18, 20 inches tall, the process is just the same, and in fact actually more important, because you really want to reduce the foliage so that the remaining rhizome can support the growth of the plant. For very young rhizomes that you split, where the leaves haven't grown very much at all, you don't need to prune these off. They're still short enough that you can just leave all the leaves on these really small bits of iris. During the pruning process, I just lay the rhizomes and leaves on the ground. They don't need to be wet. In fact, they prefer to be dry. The clump that these rhizomes came from started at about 18 inches by 18 inches. Once I separated out all of these individual rhizomes, I counted 22 individual pieces that are now ready for transplanting. And I know exactly where they're going. These irises that I'm moving in the spring were a nice white color with a tinge of yellow, but spring is not the time to transplant. That's why I've waited till the end of July to move them to the new location. In my front yard, I have some yellow irises with white irises right next to them. In the middle of the front, I have purple irises that are real close to a center walkway. And balancing these purple irises, if you look across the walkway, you'll notice another clump of purple irises. I like balance in the landscape, and that's why I did it this way. But if you keep looking around to the other side, you'll notice there's no yellow and no white irises. So the ones in the back that are coming to the front are going to go in this spot right here. I've already put some perennials in, a few bushes that are just getting started, but those white irises from the back with just the tinge of yellow should look really well here, and they'll balance with the yellow and the white on the other side. So this is the area where I want to put these white bearded irises. Planting these rhizomes is very easy. Just dig a shallow hole. It doesn't need to be deep at all. In fact, you could do a little mound in the middle of it, but what I like to do is take the rhizome, spread the roots apart, lay it against the side of the hole, and then just fill it in with the roots having dangled down to the bottom of the hole. And then dig another hole about a foot apart, and you follow the same process again. Just grab another rhizome, put it in the hole, making sure that the roots have spread out and have ample room to grow, and then just fill the hole in around those roots, gently patting and compacting the soil. You want to space the rhizomes about a foot apart because they'll grow and they'll spread. So anticipate that growth. A few clumps, a few lines, just think about how the color will fill in as these plants grow. It's important that the top of the rhizome is above the soil surface. About a third of the rhizome should be in open air, with just the bottom part covered with soil. Now that these rhizomes are in place, the next step is to water them in well, and I can expect to have years of wonderful color in this spot and the other spot that I did today. And it will balance well with the color that I have on the other side of the yard. And there you have it, how to divide and plant bearded iris. If you have any comments or questions, please let me know below. If you haven't subscribed to the Gardener Scott channel, you can do so now. And if you like the video, you can give me a thumbs up and share it. I'm Gardener Scott. Enjoy gardening.